Ladies and gentlemen. All right, we are live here with the Provoke Coach podcast. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful opportunity to share some provoking stories with people. Today I have a special guest, somebody that we were just really kind of connecting after a long time of really not speaking to each other, but following each other, obviously through social media, kind of watching, each other as we grow along the way. I have somebody with me that, hey, look, I grew up with this guy. A lot of you know who this guy is, but he's going to get a chance to share his story. I have Michigan State Representative Scott VanSingle with us. Thank you so much for being on the call today.
Yeah, great to see you again, Clint. And we were just reminiscing before we went live. I think it's been 20 or 21 years since we've actually physically hung out, but I've enjoyed following you on social media too and seeing what you're up to. And I really appreciate you reaching out to me and thinking I might actually be interesting enough to do a segment here today.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I appreciate that. Again, I mean, we talked, wow, God, we were just talking about it. The Gus Macker back in Ludington when we were about 19 years old was really kind of the last time that we hung out with, I'm sure he'll watch it, Brandon Pressler and Mindy Wirt was there, and a couple of the other guys and gals that we hung out with and that we grew up with. And wow, sometimes it's just too long, and I'm going to give you a chance to kind of take the floor a little bit and tell people kind of who you are, what you do, and kind of really the present day Scott VanSingle. And we'll get into the past, maybe a little bit later.
All right. Yeah, as Clint said, we actually went to high school together too. I've known Clint for 30 some years, probably played football with him, but my present role, as good of memories as those were 20 some years ago, my present role is I'm a state legislator here in Michigan, and I've been in that role a little over 4 years now. And it's just been an amazing ride. I don't know how many of your listeners from are outside the state versus inside the state, but here in Michigan, a state representative represents roughly about 90,000 people. I cover 3 counties, and one of the, and I'll give a quick disclaimer here because I'm sure we've got people on both sides of the aisle listening to this. I'm not going to talk politics. I'm not going to talk about issues or try to persuade people. I don't want to turn people off. We're going to have fun tonight and try to hopefully have an inspiring message that comes out of all this. So one of the things that got me into this position was I had the campaign slogan, investing in Michigan. And a lot of people come up with these slogans, make a stronger Michigan or make a better America. And it's kind of cliche and meaningless, but that slogan actually meant something to me when I ran for office. And part of it is we have very strict term limits here in Michigan. So at most, you can serve 6 years in the Michigan House, and then you're banned for life. You can never run again. And so people tend to have this very, very short-sighted perspective when they come into office. Let's get through this one more budget cycle. And I don't want to make some of these tough decisions about things that are down multiple years down the road that might affect our kids. I want to get through this one more budget cycle because I won't be here next year, or I won't be here 2 years from now. And that was not what I wanted to do, knowing full well at most I will serve 6 years and I'll be gone and I'll be a footnote in history. But I wanted to leave some sort of legacy as far as thinking about 20, 30, 40 years into the future, the things that I'm working on, whether that's addressing long-term liabilities or infrastructure and some of those needs that are easy to just put off one more year so the guy that follows you can deal with it. That was the concept behind investing in Michigan. I wanted to make these generational long-term investments, and I have been working on several of those issues. I've been working on coming up with a long-term infrastructure plan, and I've worked on a significant bill my first term about reforming the retirement systems here in Michigan that will prevent it. So things that get a little bit complicated. They're not sexy issues. They're not the things people really even campaign on, but it's one of those things that will benefit a generation from now or more.
Right. And what made you kind of decide that, really going after the legacy part? was important for you? Because you're right. I mean, you could just come in, do a thing, gone tomorrow, you know what I mean, and kind of move on. What kind of prompted you, and where did this come from as far as the legacy part?
Yeah, I have a background in business. I have a finance and accounting major and then an MBA for a grad degree. I started a small business myself. I own a real estate investment company. And I think some of the skills that you learn as a businessman, you never just think about 3 months into the future or at most 1 year. You have a long-term plan as a business person, especially as a real estate investor. When you're looking at 15, 20, potentially 30-year loans, you have almost a generational plan for that business. And so it was kind of taking some of those skill sets that I learned as a businessman in the private sector and applying that to the public sector, just continuing to have that long-term outlook, whether people appreciate it or not. It's the right thing to do.
Well, yeah, because you're thinking about the future. Legacy is an important thing as we grow. I mean, we were just talking about kind of how old we were, right? Like, fast forward, 20 years and we're the old guys, right? We're the guys that are kind of thinking about, like, hey, you should save, or you should do this, you should do that, and it's exciting that you say that, because I think a lot of people in your position, they're not looking at the long term. And we're not just talking a couple years down the road. We're talking, like you said, generations to come, right? And, it's funny that I got into this conversation a little bit during, really during, when everybody was voting and everybody was talking about who they're going to vote for, explaining this to your kids, right? And explaining why we're looking at certain topics and what. And one of the things was a little bit of legacy in the future, because, conversations was, really, hey, dad's looking out for your grandkids. Dad's looking out for, your grandkids' grandkids. Oh, wow, Dad, why are you thinking that far ahead? Well, because we're old guys now, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, do a lot of people have your same opinions? Let's talk about that for a second, not to get into too much detail, but, do they have your same thoughts of, this legacy look? Or
you can find a few here or there, and I'm not putting down my colleagues. I love the people I work with, but it's our system's not set up to encourage this. Right. You look back to our founding fathers; they were brilliant people. They understood human nature, but I think one shortfall in that system is this 2-year election cycle. It was designed to where people can very quickly turn their government into something else if they're not happy with it. But what I've seen from my personal experience is that people are never looking, when you're facing re-election every 2 years as a representative, for example, you never stop running. And so everything people do is focused on winning re-election rather than tackling some of these long-term issues. And some of them don't have popular solutions. Some of them will take revenue to fix, unfortunately. Yeah. And nobody really wants to go back to the voters knowing that you're never more than 2 years away from an election. It's hard to make some of those decisions. And thankfully, I live in a fairly homogenous district to where I think I've been able to be fairly bold and tackle some of these things. But people that live in some of those more marginal districts really have to worry about that. Do I want to get reelected, or do I want to solve this problem that I know we need to fix? But if I actually try to fix this, my career might be done. And
right.
And so that's the scenario we get into. There's so many good people that I work with that are intelligent and I think share the same values that I do, but just that constant threat of losing your job, that's hard. And I think most of us are employable elsewhere, but nobody wants to lose their job. Nobody wants to lose an election.
Well, and not only that is that, people, I think, like you said, they're doing it for maybe the wrong reasons with the right intentions, right? Like, everything is good. They have the right intentions, but like you said, when you run a business, as an example, being a business owner is hard. There's no doubt to that. You really, not only do you have to think about the future, you have to think about, the ups and downs, the peaks, the valleys. Like, you have to think about worst case scenarios, which is hard. I mean, that was one of the first things I learned about being a business owner, is that it's not all hunky-dory. It's not all cool. Like, there's going to be some tough decisions that you're going to have to make that are going to hurt, right? But that's how you get things accomplished. Now, I know that you kind of grew up with somebody kind of teaching you how to run a business properly, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But do you think you're at an advantage because you've ran, businesses before you got a little bit into the government sector and into the public sector?
Yeah, it's there's a great diversity of people I work with, and I always looked at that as a fault growing up. I want to be around people that look like me, think like me, act like me. And when I got into the work world, and especially into this job, I realized just how flawed that mindset is. This has been some of the most fulfilling times of my life the last 4 years, meeting people that think radically different than me, that look different than me, that have different backgrounds, religions, upbringings. I found a lot of value in that. And so, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I just, I think they all mean well, but I found that business owners, I think, tend to have some more of that common sense. They're not in that land of theory.
Yeah, correct.
Where, hey, I've been in the real world. If you do this to a business owner, this happens, and it's not good. Don't do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think it makes you kind of see ahead of the ball game and have more of a macro perspective on things too, because it's not just about that individual. It's also about how are we going to increase things like the economy and in that particular area. And business owners really kind of tend to have just kind of a little bit of a grasp on just the numbers, right? Like that's the difference. You know what I mean? Like that's the big thing, where those business owners, they're looking at the bottom line and the P&Ls a lot, right? And that's normal for them to look at that. Hey, it blinds them in certain cases, as right? Yeah. And to the other side of things. But that's interesting that you said that. Now, I guess, what do you see in the future for you? Because like you said, there are some limitations to what you can really do. What's next?
Yeah, I honestly don't know at this point. Luckily I've got about 20 months to decide that, but
right.
I found that being 4 years into this job, I really hate the politics side of it. I don't really enjoy running for election and doing those things. And it's not that I don't like being accountable to the people, but we've become a soundbite culture where it's difficult to communicate complicated issues into 8-second sound bites that work in elections. And running for another term isn't an option. So I'm going to have to do something different. But I found I love policy. I love problem solving, and we need more people like that in government. And so whether I ever have a role in government again or not as an elected official, I would like to maybe continue to work on policy, whether it's education related, infrastructure, natural resource issues. Those have kind of been some of the areas I've gravitated towards over the years. And I don't know what that looks like, maybe for an advocacy group or potentially work in one of the departments, for a future governor. Who knows? But there's probably a door that will open that I never saw coming a couple years from now. And I'm not scared at this point.
Right. Well, and it sounds like, a lot of people are not secure with that. They don't know. And that's kind of scary for a lot of people, but like you said, you've come in and you've been able to do the things and tackle some of the things kind of head on that you kind of wanted to in the beginning. And you're right. I mean, it's not about your next election, right? You're done running, right? Now it's a matter of, let me finish what I started. Let me problem solve, like you said, and fix, some of the issues, at hand. Now, let's kind of rewind a little bit. Like, where did all this come from? Because I know it. There's going to be a lot of people that are viewing right now that are like, I remember these guys, right? But those that aren't, and that are going to maybe listen to just the audio of this a little bit later on iTunes or, Spotify, where did all this begin? Talk to us a little bit about what got you to this point.
Yeah, so well, we grew up together, obviously in Grant, and I've lived here, still live here, 41 years now. Grew up working on the family farm. We grew carrots and onions, vegetables, and I think that's where a lot of that work ethic and character came from. When you make something with your hands and you have the faith to put seed in the ground and it turns into something, I just think there's some really good life lessons that come from that. And I spent a lot of hours out there working on the family farm, starting at about 11 years old. So it's that running a business and working with your hands and working hard and dealing with diverse groups of people that kind of started at a pretty young age. And then moving on to high school, very, very active in sports. Like I said, we played football together. And actually had some pretty big successes. Set the school record in the 100-meter dash, was a state champion power lifter, ended up being fourth in the nation powerlifting as a junior, and really derived a lot of enjoyment out of that. But and looking back, I didn't appreciate it at the time. Sports was fun. Like that was the only purpose of playing high school sports. And a lot of this came up in debate just a couple months ago when we saw winter sports didn't look like that was going to happen this year.
Right.
The argument wasn't so much about kids need to have fun. Like there's plenty of ways you can have fun, but there's character building lessons that come with team sports that you really have a pretty short window in life to learn. There's not that many team sports you can do as a 30-something-year-old. So this little window that you have in high school, looking back, the teamwork lessons and the relying on others to accomplish a job and knowing that other people are relying on me to make this block or to run this play correctly. And if I don't, 10 other people are disappointed. Those kind of lessons carry with you for life. And that's come into my role as a legislator, that you don't always get to carry the ball. But it's being part of a team and looking out for others. I trace a lot of those lessons back to being a teenager and having some good coaches.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, we had some great ones growing up. We had Stick. Which was just on just on our podcast. And a lot of others as well. That you're absolutely right. It builds so much character, and you can see it like in the kids that are growing up now, and what we're missing out on right now, like with sports and things of that nature. You can see it in kids' behaviors very, very quickly, right? Like you said, that camaraderie, that teamwork. You don't always get to run the ball. That's such a selfish thing. We all go through it. We all have egos, right? Like it's your turn to score. Like, okay, great, but it's not always your turn. Sometimes you have to be, that person that passes or assists or whatnot. So you're absolutely right with that. Let's go back to that. So I remember obviously you being just like super into, politics and into, everything to do. Even economy, you and I had government class together, and it was like, you were like there asking, like there was a twinkle in your eye. Right. That's, and that's fantastic. But even at that age, did you just have a passion for it? Like what kind of got you fired up about that?
Yeah, I always loved our government, and a lot of it's, studying history and looking back, like I mentioned earlier about the brilliance of our founders. It was almost like a divine inspiration that some of these people had to understand human nature to the extent that they did in such a short window, and then really having nothing to base that on. There weren't other systems of government. They were creating something new, and it's worked. And country after country has tried this around the world, almost word for word copying our Constitution, and it's ended in failure. And then I don't know how many different governments Haiti has been on, and they've tried to copy, some of the Western principles that we have, and it just hasn't worked. But it worked here, And it's just been fascinating to me that they were onto something, and it's up to each generation to carry that on. Ronald Reagan talked about freedom's only one generation away from failing. And I thought, I don't know what my role will be in that, but I think we're all called to do something in life, whether it's in government, business, private sector, whatever, to leave our mark on the world. And at the time, I didn't know where or if I would ever go anywhere with that, but it certainly was an interest of mine. And that did obviously develop as I got older. And like I mentioned earlier, I really don't like the politics side of it. Looking back, like the bitterness, the dehumanizing that people do to each other. It's been there since the beginning of our history. You read about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. They bitterly hated each other, and had childish back and forth debates. I don't think that's right. It wasn't right then. It's not right now. That's not the way I conduct myself. And I don't think other people should, but it does go on. I've grown to hate the side of public service, but again, I love policy. I love problem solving. I love digging into some of these really complex issues and figuring out this is why they haven't been able to solve this problem, but I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to fix this. I loved it. But that seed was planted a long time ago.
So then, obviously in high school you got fired up, and then you went off to college. I mean, was that kind of your intention, or was it more, get your business degree and kind of take that path down? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I thought going to college, and when I graduated, I'll probably stay in the private sector my whole life. I always had that interest, but believe it or not, I'm actually a pretty shy person. And maybe you remember that from high school, maybe not. But what you have to do to run for office is unlike anything you'd probably do in any other job. It's like having a job interview about 4,000 times, and then having horrible comments directed at you after some of the interviews, and so that was something that was so far outside my comfort zone. I said, I can never do this. And I got to be in my mid to late 30s, and I started having people reach out to me and saying, Scott, we want you to run for office when the seat comes available here in a couple years. And I thought back to some of those Bible stories you learn as a kid when Moses is told, I need you to go to Pharaoh and talk to him, and he had all these excuses. I'm not a good speaker. I'm shy. I stutter. He had a long list of, and I think a lot of them were pretty legitimate excuses. And after there was an answer, I got your back. Don't worry about it. And I went through that same list of excuses. Well, it takes a lot of money to run for office. I don't have the funds at this age to do something like that. I don't want to go knock on thousands of people's doors. I'm not comfortable getting up in front of large crowds. And it really didn't hit me until maybe a year or two into office. I had a pastor come and ask me to speak to his church, and he wanted me to talk about, what are some lessons you learned, kind of like what we're doing today, like a challenge you had and how it helped you fix or face this challenge. And it didn't hit me until I was preparing to give that message, how many of those almost miraculous answers I received. The money issue, up until like the last few weeks of the campaign, I wasn't sure where some of this money was going to come from, if I was going to have to raid my retirement account and maybe never pay it. And all of a sudden checks started showing up in the mail the last few weeks before the election, and I had enough. And like that was just an answer, unexpected. These weren't even checks I asked for. And I didn't know some of the people. And the courage thing, I didn't have a hard time going out and knocking on doors, and that absolutely terrified me a year earlier. I mean, to the point where I would be sick to my stomach thinking about it. Well, public speaking, I actually love public speaking now. I like doing interviews like this. I do television interviews and actually get a lot of fulfillment out of it. And so it's every one of those objections I had as I was thinking through this process, that need was met. And I, for whatever reason, didn't appreciate it at the time. But looking back, I just say, man, that every prayer, every ask that I had was answered.
Absolutely. Well, and that's fantastic. You just said that is that, you don't really know where things are going to come from. You don't really have the answers, right? Like in business, and I deal with this with clients all the time, whether it's public speaking, whether it's really kind of having an uncomfortable conversation. It's because you're not brought up like that, right? Like you were brought up, like I know your parents, I know your upbringing. You were brought up to don't speak unless you're spoken to, and be very polite, and just you know what
Avoid
I mean? Like,
conflict.
yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, avoid conflict. Don't do that. And then, boom, life's hit. That now you got to get up. Like you said, you don't really like the politics. That's not your personality. Your personality is not just to be over the top, like run for office, like you know what I mean? Like we all know who those people are. They're really, really good at it, but then maybe they're not so good at following through and actually getting stuff done. They're really good at campaigning, right? And getting hired. And then when they get in there, like I've hired people like that before, to where I'm like, wow, what happened to the so-and-so, man? They seem like a great, idea. And then boom, it doesn't happen. Well, that's fantastic that you look back at, these opportunities, because there's a lot of people out there, Scott, in whatever they're doing right now, they don't know where it's going to come from. They don't know what's going to happen. And like you said, you look back and you weren't grateful then, but you most certainly are now. How did that kind of pivot for you? How did that kind of change kind of your perspective a little bit?
Yeah. I don't know. I felt that tugging at my heart too, that, some people say that to me, that's the Lord. To some people, that's their conscience. Not here to judge one or the other tonight, but I have to admit, I feel guilty that I was not as grateful at the time, because I felt that guidance all the way through the process, that I had a calling and I had fears, and every one of those needs was met. But my encouragement too would be, and not all these are long spiritual or holy war type journeys. Some of it's just a job search, or it's you're building a business. I would encourage people, have a realistic plan, know what your end goal is, and have a realistic plan to do that, and then stick to it. I think so many of the times that people fail in life, they have a goal, there's point A and point B, but nothing's mapped out in between, and then they fail to take that first step to get there because of fear. And a lot of those fears dissipate when you have a plan. And so I did sit down throughout that process too, and come up with a plan. Here's how many doors I'm going to knock. Here's where I'm going to do it. Here's much money, what I'm going to spend on direct mail. And if I stick to this plan, I will win. And I did. And obviously that's not a guarantee. There's plenty of candidates, whether it's in my line of work or it's in business. I thought I nailed that job interview and I didn't get it. But I can tell you, more often in life, or more often than not in life, if you have an ambitious goal and you come up with a detailed plan on how to get there, it may not be easy, but that's a number one thing that stops people from failing, is they don't take that first step. And that was maybe one of the things you're going to bring up later, but I guess I could talk about it right now, is some of the challenges that came into place, both starting a business and this, is the naysayers, the people. Some of them have your self-interest. Some of the people have your best self-interest in mind. They don't want to see you fail. They love you. But some of them are jealous too. And so those same people will reach out to you, and it's hard to see through which is which. Those people will reach out to you and say, Clint, don't do it. You're going to fail. And you have to drown those voices out and say, if I have a reasonable plan, and here's what I have to do to get from point A to point B, I will get there. And and I had that when I started a business. Don't go in debt. Don't do this. You'll go broke. You'll never make money. I'm glad I didn't listen to those voices. And the same again, running for office. you won't win. You're going to go broke. You'll never get the money back that you spend on your campaign. People are going to hate you, and you can let all those fears overwhelm you, or you can try to sort through some of those too and say, I don't think all these people have my best interest in mind.
Well, not only that, but they didn't have a plan for themselves either, right? So, there's always going to be haters out there. There's always going to be these people that are going to tell you, no, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, or, yeah, oh, go, give it a shot. Those are your best, to where you're like, man, the older that I think that I get, I start to understand that I become my own cheerleader, number one, right? Like, and you're absolutely right. I think what's powerful, what you said, is that there's a lot of dreamers out there, but take the dream one step further and see what happens. Meaning, like you said, like a business plan. Like, you don't walk into a bank and say, well, yeah, I need money. What are you going to do? I'm going to start a company. What kind of company you're going to start? Well, this kind of company. Okay, well, how are you going to get there? Do you have a business plan, right? Do you have step by step of how you're going to do that? And that's powerful that you said that, because I think that gives you more confidence, because all you got to know is, how do I get from step one to step two? Once you got to step two, now how do I get from step two to step three? Instead of, like you said, point A to point B, right? How do I get from step one to step 10? It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Now, that's fantastic. I mean, if anybody's listening right now, I mean, that would be right here at this time where I would push, the record button and just really rewind that up. Now, talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the provoking situations or stories throughout your life that kind of made you pivot and really go down this path. Can you talk about those for a couple minutes? And I guess it doesn't matter at what age these different things happen throughout your life that kind of got you to where you're at now.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. I'm not going to turn this into a Billy Graham crusade or try to get ultra religious with you, but I can't ignore the part that faith has played in my life. And it was going back probably in my early 30s. I started hearing that verse over and over, where it talks about go be salt and light in the world, meaning go make an impact, be something positive in the world. And I looked at my job and I said, every day I go to work and I type in a spreadsheet and I close my computer at the end of the day, and then I go home. And what have I accomplished? How in any way have I changed the world or impacted anybody? And I didn't really feel any fulfillment out of that. And so I think that's sort of what drove me into getting into public service. And I didn't know what that looked like at the time. I still hadn't put all the pieces together of, the ultimate goal is this. And I still don't know what my goal is after this. I'm 41 years old. I'm assuming I'm going to be doing something after this. And I hope it's fulfilling and life-changing for a lot of people, but that hit me at a relatively young age. That and I'm not putting down other professions. We need accountants. I can't say I enjoyed it, but there are ways to change people's lives and be a positive role model for people. But just sticking to that 9-to-5 job and not ever getting outside your comfort zone. I don't feel like we're always doing that. And so that was one of the things that really called me to kind of sort of get out of my comfort zone and change career paths. And that's hard to do, especially if you have a mortgage and you're.
Uh-oh. All right, guys, looks like we lost Scott here for a second. Get you back on. Yep. All right.
Not sure what happened there, but
yeah, no worries. We got you now.
Yeah, but one of the other things I wanted to mention too, just as we both get older, looking back, you don't have anything to lose when you're 18, 20, 22 years old. You get less and less or more and more risk averse as you age, and you have more to lose as far as you have a house and a retirement, and you have a family that you need to spend time with. Take these bold steps when you're young, and come up with that plan, but think it through, because you may get to a certain age where you figured out what you want to do, you have the plan, and it's too hard to get out of that comfort zone.
Well, and that's,
or you just don't have the.
Well, and like you said, that's tough. Do it when you're young enough and there's still a lot of time. And like every person that has been very successful with saving money and retirement and investing in the market, when they see somebody that's like 20 years old, they're like, do it, just go in, go crazy, go bonkers, because if you fail, you're going to fail and rebound like 2 or 3 more times before it even matters. Right. And that's a good thing, because like you said, I mean, that's going, again, we're going in those small steps. Right. And then you have the room to do it, because, look, I changed career paths a couple of years ago. I mean, just before I turned 40 years old, I left, corporate America, cushy salary, insurance, the whole 9 yards, to follow my dreams. Right. And that's a hard thing to do. Like you said, like in your 30s, like that's hard to do, because you're right. You got a mortgage, a lot's riding on your intuition. Right. And some people are looking at you. I know my wife was like, are you sure about this? Right. Like, are you sure, but you bet on yourself. But I think what you said is what I've been having an opportunity to do. And that's, I had a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan by any means, but it was some sort of a plan. So I knew I was going to make it at least this far, to be able to do that. Now, what other provoking moments, I guess, did you have essentially along the way? I mean, I know that you're a father. That probably changed your perspective on a lot of things, throughout the years. We were talking about that, prior to us going live. Anything with that?
I think that almost makes it harder to do some of these bold things, because my young daughter's depending on my health insurance, and me being gainfully employed and having a roof over her head. So, do I really want to do this? I have no regrets, obviously, at this point, but it worked out. But I would say that just people encouraging me along the way too. There were a couple of key people that their opinion meant enough to me when they said, Scott, we've got your back. We know you can do this. We want you to do it. That changed my trajectory. And so I also would encourage people, not just those looking at doing something bold, but be one of those encouragers. You never know how much influence you may have with somebody. And the people that encouraged me probably don't know they were the ones that helped put me over the top to make that decision. They thought I'm just one of 100 people that reached out to Scott. No, you had a huge impact on my life. And they're probably not the people that thought that they would have a big impact. And some of the people that were discouraging me probably thought that they had a lot bigger influence in my life than what they did. And I didn't listen to those voices. So you never know who you're going to impact from a positive perspective. So I would encourage you to encourage people realistically.
And encourage them in a way that, like I'm, I mean, our daughters are right around the same age to where we have to ask questions, right? Like, I mean, that's my daughter and I's conversation. Dad, I want to do this. Okay, well, let's talk about it, right? And I start asking questions to provoke thought, because you're absolutely right. You want to encourage them. It's like I had a guy tell me once, he's like, my parents, always told me I was good at sports. You know what I mean? And later did I realize I actually sucked. You know what I mean? But I had so much fun because it was encouraging that, what he got accomplished was really, really powerful. So you're absolutely right. Not only that, but be encouraging. That's powerful, because you can't always be, Debbie Downer, right? Like I don't know if I would do that. Like, you can't be that guy or that gal all the time, whether you care about that person or not, because that's hard. You know what I mean? Like we all have parents and grandparents and loved ones that are like, well, now, Scott, are you sure you want to get into politics? You know, like they love you.
Yeah.
Their intentions are good, but they may have not swayed you, you know, in that direction.
Yeah. Well, and another aspect too, you never know. We know who we talk to directly, but you never know who you'll influence indirectly. And
That's
I look at
correct.
books that I've read. I'm a huge fan of Warren Buffett, and
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't be more different politically. But I find the man fascinating. His mind, his wit, his investment philosophy, and I've learned a lot of lessons from him. I've never personally met the guy. I probably never will.
Hmm.
But he's had a huge influence on my life. And so you never know by something you write or post on social media or just something you say in the public sphere, what influence that may have on somebody and change their trajectory in life.
Well, yeah, and I think that you're right. I mean, with legacy in the world that we live in now is like everything is recorded, right? Like people will watch this like when we're dead. Like our kids will watch this and be like, hey, look at these two old guys, you know, on here, you know, talking about the world, you know, talking about this or that. But it is really legacy, you know. And I remember when I first was, you know, afraid to turn the camera on, like because of how we were brought up. You know, it was, you know, you're just not trying to be in the limelight. You know, I may have been a little bit less shy than you, Scott, you know, growing up, but you know, nonetheless, you
I
know,
remember
like,
that.
you know, you know, but nonetheless, you want to be able to live, you know, leave a legacy, and nothing is more important for me to have my daughter not look at old photos of me, but, you know, watch these life lessons that I talk about on a daily basis, have these awesome conversations with people that are provoking, you know, positive change throughout, you know, years and years and years to come. Let me ask you this question. I mean, about what you do and really where you come from, you know, what would be that, I guess, that one nugget or that life lesson that you would be able to pass on to the generations to come? Like, what would be that advice for people? Would it be like what you were talking about already as far as, you know, taking risks while you're early, or is it something else?
That would be a big one, but I would say above all, never ever sacrifice your integrity to do something like whether it's in public service like this, whether it's in business. There's no dollar amount you can put on your integrity. There's no position you can gain in life that's worth more than your integrity. And I've taken a lot of crap in my job because there's certain things that you're expected to repeat that you know
Yeah.
aren't true, that would be politically beneficial for me if I said this, but I can't do it. And
Yeah.
maybe it ends my career. Maybe I never serve in public office again, and that's fine. But my daughter will know that her dad is an honest man. I'll know that I'm an honest man. And I can't imagine sacrificing that for anything. And so I would encourage people listening tonight to always take the high road. The quick dollar is not always worth it, or never worth it.
Yeah.
It takes years to build a reputation. And, you know, it's another Warren Buffett quote. As I mentioned earlier, he talks about, you know, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and you can ruin it in 15 minutes. And you do things differently when you think about that.
You know, and integrity is a big thing, and not just, like you said, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector as well, in corporate America. I mean, you know, the politics that run in some of these large corporations and these big businesses is worse than what you can see at the Capitol. I mean, it really is. I mean, and it's in when there, especially because there's money involved. And I think that's powerful. What you said is integrity goes a long way in your morals and your values. And that just doesn't mean, like you said, it doesn't mean just the God that, you know, that you worship, right? It doesn't mean your religion. It doesn't necessarily mean your spirituality. It's about, you know, what our founding fathers were really talking about and creating, right, these systems for, you know, the American people, and creating these systems that are going to follow those ethical guidelines, right? Because honesty goes a heck of a lot longer than a couple of bucks here or there, because you can always make more money. right? You can, but once you, once you cross that ethical line, there's just no going back. And, that's something to be very, very proud of. And your daughter, I'm sure, when she does want to listen to this, many years down the road, my daughter too, she thinks I'm not cool because I'm on Facebook, right? But whatever.
Yeah, she tells me I have a boring job, but I work in a cool building. So.
You work in a cool building, but you got a boring job. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I tell you what, man, it's been a fantastic conversation tonight, man. It really has. And look, I mean, we did go 45 minutes with you, not talking about yourself, but talking about your mission, which I think is more important, than, both you and I. So I do appreciate you being on. And where can people find you? I mean, they could just look you up and find your details, on your email. I know you're on Facebook, or you're on Instagram, or any of the other ones as well.
I don't do any of the other social medias, but if you Google Rep VanSingle, and it's spelled with an EL at the end, but the first thing that would come up is my official website, and you can find all my contact info on there, and a brief bio, and some info about some important issues we're working on.
Okay.
But yeah, shoot me an email if you have any questions, and be happy to get back with you. And but I really appreciate the invite. I hope your listeners found this worthwhile, and found a few truths that they can apply to life, or some inspiration. And you're ever back in Michigan, you got a place to stay if you ever want to come back. I'd love to hang out again.
Oh yeah. Well, when it warms up a little bit, I mean, I think it's starting to get warm up there now. Now I might make a trip up. Well, man, it's been fantastic. I mean, for everybody, we're going to get this downloaded on Spotify. We're going to download it on iTunes, all your major audio for you to actually just listen. Yeah. If you're driving to work, obviously we don't want you watching the video. But if you don't want to watch the video either, you just want to listen to the message, definitely do that. Share it if you like today or tonight's, call and broadcast. Definitely share it around where, hey, wherever you want. We're definitely down for it. Scott, stick around after the call here for a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are signing off. Provoke positive change in people's lives. And hey, let's do it right now.